All right, guys, now we are going to throw a small platter. Usually I don't teach this until the end of the semester. However, I've noticed that several of you have made what I like to call flower pots. Those are the ones that are vases that have a hole in the bottom. And it would be nice if we would be able to raku both parts of our piece, which is when we throw a platter for the bottom of it, so that the water has some place to trap. Although when you're making a flower pot, you do actually always want a hole in the bottom. First thing I'm doing is I'm centering my clay. Most important thing about when you throw a platter is that your piece stay perfectly centered. It's very easy for your platter to become extremely wobbly, and you quickly lose control of it when it's not perfectly centered. So you can tell that I'm taking the time to make sure that my clay is exactly perfectly centered. And then I'm going to begin flattening it so that it creates a disc, a flat disc. So those of you who like to throw by coning, you're going to probably want to not cone when you center for this piece. And you can see it's still just a little bit off center. I'm a big fan of holding my breath and closing my eyes when I center. Again, centering has nothing to do with sight. It has everything to do with feel. And you can't see it, but I actually have my eyes closed.
Hey, this is Colby Calais, and I want to let you know that my new album, The Malibu Sessions, will be released next week, but you can hear it right now on Pandora Premieres.
Then I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to begin cutting underneath it to give it somewhat of an undercut so that I have some place to put my thumb. Because the flat disc is not a platter and that will just explode in the kiln. So we actually need to make a small, shallow bowl is actually what a platter is. And you can see that I'm beginning to kind of pinch it out. You always want to make sure you keep something underneath. I like to keep my thumb underneath. But you can see that it's becoming somewhat of a flat, shallow bowl. You do tend to leave the middles of the platters a little bit thicker as we're going to trim that out. And we don't want to trim a hole in the bottom of our platter. So again, it is all about keeping your piece centered. If you knock it off center, it's going to be very difficult to trim off the lip of your piece. You see that I'm running my finger underneath it. I just want to make sure that I keep a ridge, and you can see that there's a very small little ridge here, which is where my piece would sit in. So you may want to measure the size of your piece before it gets fired, because it does shrink about 1/2 inch. So it's best to put these two together in the kiln, your vase or your flower pot, on top of your platter so that they shrink evenly if they fit exactly. This isn't a real big platter. You need probably about 1 pound of clay to get a pretty decent size, we'll call it a dessert platter, which is what most of you guys will need if you make a flower pot. I also like to take the rib and compress the clay. I've seen several people's centers of their platters blow out, literally blow up in the kiln, because they tend to not wedge their clay as well as they should. And so any of the little air bubbles that are in that middle part are going to cause you big problems, since we are leaving it a little bit thicker. So you can see that I'm kind of compressing that clay, any air that I do have in the clay, and I'm putting the water back into the clay. I want to keep that ridge, that lip of that very shallow bowl, kind of pretty pronounced. So I like to keep my thumb kind of underneath there to begin to pull. It's kind of a pinching motion, as you can see with my right hand. I'm kind of pinching as I pull out. People either swear that platters are the easiest thing to throw, or they swear they're the hardest thing to throw. If you can throw a platter, you can throw a bowl. If you can throw a bowl, you can throw a vase. I don't want the edges of my platter to come up per se like the sides of a bowl, but I don't want it to be so floppy that it flops down like a Frisbee. Gonna again use the chamois along the edge. I don't like sharp edges on the tops of things, guys. Then I'm gonna go back in and make that edge just a little bit more pronounced. Turn my wheel off. Best habit you can be in, turn your wheel off. You should find nobody's wheels on when they leave class. So just getting in the habit of every time shutting your wheel off before you cut with the wire cutters. It's a good habit to get into. My platter is done. I will now let it dry until it's leather hard, and then I will trim it. That's how you throw a platter. If you guys got any questions, let me know.